to the Dialogue Out Loud podcast. I'm Ryan Shoemaker here with Joe Plicka, and we're fiction editors at Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought. As fiction editors, it's our great pleasure to speak with Charity Shumway, an esteemed writer in the world of Mormon letters, whose short story, The First Letter She Found, appears in the latest issue of Dialogue. Charity Shumway is the author of 2 novels, Bountiful from BCC Press, winner of the Association for Mormon Letters 2020 Novel Award, and 10 Girls to Watch from Washington Square Press. She earned an MFA in creative writing from Oregon State University and a BA in English from Harvard College. She and her family live in the Hudson Valley. Charity, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. So nice to be here.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sending the story as co-fiction editors of Dialogue. Joe and I are looking for more female voices. For some reason, it's just male writers who are submitting to us. And I'll tell you, kind of on a personal note, when your story came into the queue, I read it immediately and I got tears in my eyes. And I was so moved. I was so touched by it. I think I texted Joe immediately and said, "You have to read the story. Like this is one we have to publish it." It's such, I think, a unique telling of somebody's faith journey, and as somebody who teaches at a kind of a majority LDS, a public university with a high LDS population, and teaching creative writing, I see a lot of stories, faith journey stories, so many so that I think they fall into cliche and it's almost kind of a genre. But I find your story is just unique, gives a unique perspective on this LDS faith journey.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so glad you had such a response to it, and glad to hear it didn't feel like it was hitting all the cliche notes. That's great to hear as a writer.
Not at all. So I'm always curious, and
Yeah.
What were the seeds of this story? Where did it emerge?
I think for me, I've always wanted to write stories about my people and my faith, but not just for people in my community, not just people in the church. And that's very hard to do unless you come at it from a particular angle where you're able to explain things naturally. And so this story is a letter from a mother to her daughter. Mother has left her faith behind and is writing to her daughter. So her daughter doesn't know all of the terms and all, what everything means. So it creates this opening and opportunity to explain what the temple is. Because if you're going to write about the temple in just a story for your average reader, that means nothing. They don't have an emotional response to it. Or if you're going to talk about garments, or if you're, any of these things, you have to be able to not just define the terms, but make them emotionally resonant for readers. And so I liked the idea of a letter story. I can't remember what story I read that was also in the form of a letter that made me want to try this. But that's always the angle I'm looking for. Like, how do you explain without it being boring? How do you invite readers in? Because I've always wanted to write for a broader audience. So,
yeah. And I think it's so interesting with kind of that form you're taking, explaining to like a daughter who doesn't have a background. As a member, like I find it refreshing because I think you explain it in such a way that kind of defamiliarizes it and allows us to see it from the perspective of maybe somebody who doesn't know about these things, like the mystery of it, but also I think the strangeness of time, admittedly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to know, like, as you wrote this story, did you decide initially, I'm going to choose this epistolary form? I'm going to write it as a letter. Did you experiment with other forms?
This one was right away a letter, but I've actually written quite a few stories with these characters. So there are others that aren't letters, and there are other things, but this one was right away a letter. I think there's something that's so intimate when you're talking to somebody, when it's addressed to somebody, and um, it's already set up in a way where you're trying to, invite somebody to understand you. You're trying to so direct, to speak to somebody. So it's such an evocative form. I like it. It's one I've tried a few times, and I felt like it captured something here. So I'm
Mhm.
glad to be able to play around with it. But yeah, I think I also appreciate that, a mother writing to her daughter in this instance, it's complicated. And I think she's able to um, try to be open and share things, but then also is eager to, make sure she's not saying too much or saying the wrong thing. And I like that tension. So
Mhm.
that was another thing I felt like, because it's, talking to a child, it's this mother reflecting back on the choices she made and leaving the church and having a family outside the faith, and some of her regrets about that, but also not regretting her life, and making that very clear, but also having real feelings of sort of sorrow about, some of the choices she made. And I think that tension is there when you're talking to a child, right? You're not saying, I wish you were never born. It's not what she's saying at all. Um, so I don't know. I liked that complication.
It is really, there's a lot of different complications in this story. And I was just going to say again, compliment you on what an excellent, because like you exactly said, that we, in the church, it's so much about sharing our beliefs. And, to be like, how can I get the church into a story? How can I explain this complicated relationship to this organization in a story? And the obvious choice would be, oh, it'll be a missionary story. Like someone will go and, they'll talk to somebody who's investigating the church. But this layer of complication, a parent talking to their child about something that they used to know, used to understand and believe, but that the child has no idea that it is this part of this. That's just a more powerful kind of
Mm,
revelation, and there's just something really tender about it, and tender in my mind. This is not just a story about um, faith journeys and losing faith, but it's very much a story about womanhood and
mm,
motherhood and being a woman, and such like wonderful irony in the story, not in a gotcha kind of way, like a gotcha, like you can't win if you're a woman, like no matter where you go, but there is this acknowledgement that
mhm,
you know women are often asked to subsume their identity into something else, and it might be the church or it might be a marriage with a
mhm,
husband who doesn't want anything to do with the church, but you still lose something. You lose a part of
mhm,
yourself. And where can you go to be able to express all the parts of yourself? And I know it's not just a problem for women, it's a human problem, but it's
mhm.
especially pronounced in this story in that way. And it's just lovely.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I feel like one of the tensions that I liked is that the things that are pulling her, one is faith and this beautiful sort of family, and, just I think there, things she talks about where it's just the sense of belonging and, this sort of pure spiritual kernel. And then she also, love, and this idea that she wants to be with somebody she loves, and she wants a family, and she, doesn't want to wake up when she's 40 and say, what have I done marrying this nice Mormon man and I can't make this work anymore. So it's this tension where she's, pulled by two good things. And so it's not a straightforward, obvious, like, here's a good thing and here's a bad thing. It's two good things. And I liked that tension in there.
Yeah. I mean, if it, on a very practical level, if the question is, do I marry for love or do I marry for identity?
Mm,
I would, for my daughter, I think I would say love, like
yeah.
that's that's the greater good. Uh, but losing identity is also heartbreaking. So,
hmm hmm Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I also like the title of the story, which is implying that she doesn't actually give the letter to her daughter because it's such a complicated thing to convey, right? Like, and as a parent, you're often not trying to share your most complicated feelings with your children, you know, especially when they're about you, you're trying to lay things out for them in a more straightforward way. So, I like this idea that she writes this letter and it's for her daughter, but for her. And then, where do you share that, or do you not share that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this world, I mean that the title is so evocative, right? And if every story comes to an end, of course, but it almost seems that title suggests a kind of future where the daughter finds this letter and that there are other letters.
Mhm.
So what do you imagine? I mean, it sounds like this is you've written about these characters before. I don't know if this, and we'll get to maybe future
Yeah.
projects, like
Yeah.
in this cosmology of this world of these characters. What are some of those other letters?
Yeah.
What's
Um,
happens?
I have written about these characters before, but I actually haven't written other letters. Maybe I should. Maybe I will. I don't know.
Could we hit the third letter she found,
Yeah.
maybe, or what was that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a title that leaves that open. Yeah. I haven't written other letters though, but it is a form I really like. So I don't know.
Yeah. So beyond, and Joe kind of mentioned this, beyond, right? This is a story, about a woman who's kind of left her faith, but there's like, yeah, kind of implicit in it a message that a mother wants to give her daughter.
Mhm.
That's even beyond faith. Could you talk about that just for a little bit? Like, what is within the story? Like, what is that message? There almost seems something contemporary here in this world that we live in, where I feel like a resurgence of toxic masculinity, of patriarchy, where women have to suppress themselves. And I love how you use that word. So, what is beyond religion? What is the message?
Yeah.
What does this mother want to teach her daughter about the world?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the thing that she says in the story, over and over is, there's this territory of yourself, and it's hard to even know who you are or what you want. And I think there's like a line, and I really like it's finding stability in uncertainty.
Hmm.
Because somebody who's sure, they can sway you so easily. They're like, I know this is the thing, but if you're uncertain, how do you protect that? And how do you find stability there? And I think that's really what she's urging on her daughter. Even if you're young and uncertain, it doesn't mean you have to give everything up because somebody else is certain. And so I think, I am not the age of the daughter she's writing to, but I still feel that in my own life. I mean, I think we all feel that sometimes when you aren't sure, how do you find any strength in that? So I think, and I think that's, I don't have any daughters. I just have sons, but I would also like for, them to be able to feel that. I want to feel that, patience with yourself, with indecision, tolerance for discomfort, all of those things. I think, that is the bigger thing she's trying to say. And I think that she wishes she had had more for herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which, has to do with faith, but as you said, has to do with everything. Yeah.
I love the word that you use a couple of times in the story, unembarrassment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Like it's such a wonderful way of describing something that's not naivete and not like, careless conformity, but something else.
I will say from my personal experience, that is a feeling I have had sometimes that I've only ever had like in, well, what do I want to say about myself? I don't know how much I want to say about myself. Let me back up and say that I think it can be very easy to feel embarrassed when you're talking about spirituality. at least for me, I think the most intimate things are like sex and spirituality, right? So this story is about both of those,
Yeah.
you know, and those are things where talking about it, either one-on-one or in groups, can feel embarrassing. It can feel clunky. It can feel awkward. Um, but I think when you have moments where you feel seen and recognized and nothing is drawing you, or you feel quiet and unseen, but fine and safe,
Yeah.
um, and nothing is sort of hitting on any of those, that sense of, oh, I hope nobody's seeing this or feeling this, or, oh, this is so, all of those things go quiet. It's really beautiful. And I think there are so many things about, like, the Latter Day Saint experience that can be embarrassing. It's so wonderful
Yeah.
when you can
I,
feel,
I teach at BYU, Hawaii. I know. There's a
yeah,
lot of, yeah.
there's a lot of embarrassment. And it's so wonderful when you can feel really safe and unembarrassed. I think that is one of the, like, greatest feelings I've ever had, like, and it's not an everyday feeling.
the peculiarity, because that's one of the phrases you say,
Yeah.
complete unembarrassment, as if I could at last embrace every bit of LDS peculiarity is.
Yeah. Well, and in the story, that's this moment when the mother has gone through the temple.
Yeah.
And it's this, quiet moment. It's, not in the midst of any of the ceremonies or anything. It's just a sort of quiet moment. And nobody is questioning her faith or asking her any questions about her faith. She's just accepted and there. And it is this pure moment of experience. And that's, I think, a remarkable moment.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, what I was getting at too, I think, is that teaching here is wonderful. It's amazing. And yet, like, I find myself wishing that we were a little more embarrassed sometimes.
Mm.
But I've also experienced the other side of it. I went to school in Ohio. Talking about spiritual things is a lot different in Utah than it is in Boston and New York, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so it's this feeling that it's interesting. Not everyone has maybe felt that in the world, but when you have, it's this weird thing where you feel guilty for feeling that way.
Mm.
Like, you're like, am I not, proud enough of my
Mm.
faith? Does this mean that I'm weak?
Yeah.
Or weak, but it is a real, like, but the unembarrassment, I think, is the real thing, which is
Yeah.
the ability to, like, that there are spaces where believers can feel 100% vulnerable, and safe before God and other people. And that's not just, that's not just hiding, that's not just hiding from the world. Like, that's a real need. Like, that's a real treasure. And so I loved how you dramatized that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then also, there's a kind of, the narrator of this piece, the mother, there seems to be quite a loneliness at times, right? There's this spiritual core that she has that her family doesn't know about, but also, like, there's a spiritual side, a side of her that she even keeps from those of her faith in her family. Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm so intrigued by that idea of those sides of ourselves that
Yeah.
don't share with others, and
Yeah.
why we
Yeah.
don't.
Well, I think the character, the thing that she says is it was so hard for her to find herself at home in the blazing faith of her, you know, fellow church members. There's a lot of, and she talks about even the language that people use, in meetings, like, I know, I am certain, and that's sometimes it even sounds corporate, and all of the things that don't feel like they match her, the sort of discomfort she has there. But then on the other side, when it's, people who have zero understanding of what faith is, and, her husband is an absolute atheist and doesn't want anything to do with any of that. You know, like I sort of, as we were talking about before, where can you find stability in uncertainty and in discomfort? You know, she's not really comfortable in either of those places and is sort of feeling as if she's supposed to be comfortable in one or the other. So, you know, I think there's that. But then I also think, you know, the thing that she's articulating is, even though she's taken these parts of herself and, you know, kind of put them away, like, you know, it sort of opens with, the story opens with a bag of garments in a closet, you know, in temple clothes. So she's basically taken it all and shoved it in this bag and put it in the closet. You know, she's still writing this letter to her daughter and saying, you know, I always wanted to share my spiritual self with somebody. But isn't that impossible? It probably is. I don't know, but I'm writing this letter anyway. And I do think that's a yearning that we all have. And, you know, I think anytime we're able to do that and have those kind of moments of unembarrassed communion with others, you know, I think that is such a good for humans and our spirits, you know, the world, and a thing that we all want deep down, but it's hard. Those moments are rare. They're remarkable and special. And, you know, yeah.
I think Chekhov, this is something I teach my students, right? That as writers, like, we write these stories and we pose kind of these deep existential questions. But the nice thing is, like, as writers, we don't have to give the answers, right? That's for those who read our stories. And so, I mean, I think you ask some incredible questions, like in this moment, you know, as people leave the church, especially women, educated women, you know, in their middle age, and young people, and I guess I would want to ask, you know, just your thoughts. You know, what might change that would make women's experience in the church better, or even as a culture? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean,
Well, now we're asking you to answer the question.
Yeah,
you are asking
Instead of
you are
asking.
asking me to answer big questions, and I have
But
two.
Yeah.
And the first is, you know, one of my most beloved friends, Melissa Inouye, and, you know, who passed away last year. And I feel like she's thought about this and written about this more beautifully and articulately than
Sacred Struggle, one of my
Yep.
favorite.
So what I would say is, I just recommend Sacred Struggle. Go read it. I'm sure you have. You know, I admire what she has to say and think all of her thoughts about, you know, changes that can be made that are meaningful to people are wonderful. And then I think the other thing is, for me, I think I wrote this story more as a way of trying to share what it feels like to be a believer with people who aren't LDS in any way, you know, like, you know, more like I wanted it to, you know, share it with my college friends, you know, or, you know, my neighbors down the road, or like my Catholic husband, you know, like, what is this? What does it feel like to have grown up in this faith? You know, what is that experience? Have either of you guys read Recapitulation by Wallace Stegner? It's like takes place in Salt Lake City, and I just read it the other day. I'd never read it before, and I thought, I've never read, you know, I just wondered, like, what if I'd read that in high school instead of The Great Gatsby? You know, it's this book that makes Salt Lake City in the 1920s the most alive place you've ever read. And I think when I was writing this story, I just wanted to make the experience of questioning your faith as a Latter-day Saint something that was the most like an alive experience to any old reader. You know, like, just, you know, someone who's not religious in any way, but like, what could this feel like? So I think, like, for me, where I'm coming to this is more, you know, sort of wanting to share this experience with a broader reader. But I think I'm so amazed at Melissa's thoughts for how to shape, you know, the church and culture from within. So I think Melissa's got it better than I ever will.
Plug, yeah, for Melissa Inouye's Sacred Struggle. So
Yeah.
because it was like I am such a romantic, and as I read your story, I kept thinking, like that husband, why doesn't he just capitulate a little, and why is he
Mm.
so anti-religion, and why doesn't he just give the space, for this woman why can't they have like an interfaith
Mhm.
marriage? And I wanted that, but I know that it's so much more complicated than that. My wife and I don't know if you watched it, but we're loving Nobody Wants This.
Oh,
So, the rabbi who wants,
yeah.
is longing for his, fiance to convert. And I know it's just not as easy as, we hold to our beliefs, we want to share the sacred thing with the people closest to us. But I have to also remember, like, that husband, like, he feels just as strongly about his beliefs about
Yeah.
religion too. So
Yeah.
you present a world with lots of tension, a
Mhm.
complicated world, but I think a world that reflects our own. In fact, I think, right, the story, it almost feels like a kind of deeper metaphor for this this as the nuns versus the religious folks, right? That there's
Mhm.
this growing kind of just a divide, and as a culture, right, we have to find this place where we can all get along,
Mhm.
those who practice religion and those who don't. And I think that's what
Right.
your character's navigating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that it sort of does get back to that idea of what do you do if somebody else is so certain and you are not equally certain in a different way? You're just less certain,
Mhm.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that your desire to write a story that makes being LDS come alive to somebody who may never have thought about what that experience is like is um, what gives the story such value beyond just the pages of dialogue. I mean, I've been reading The Chosen with my English 315 students every fall, and um, they love it. They absolutely love it. It's a world that's totally foreign to them, familiar in the sense that it's about a conservative religious tradition, but also like you read that book and Judaism comes alive to you, right? And it's not that you necessarily want to convert to it or
Yeah.
but whatever, but that's where LDS fiction needs to go, right? That's the maturing of LDS fiction beyond either the, stories that are just about faith defending and faith promoting,
Mm.
or the opposite. I mean, we publish a lot of irreverent stories in dialogue, and we love it. We need to have those. In fact, there's one coming up in a future issue that I'm really excited for. But and not to pigeonhole your story as a reverent story, right? But something that treats the faith seriously
Mm.
in a human way, not in a partisan secular way, or sectarian way, but just as a human thing that I do think anybody who wanted to just read a good story about, somebody and feel what it's like to be somebody else without feeling preached to or without feeling, like there's any kind of tear down going on. This story hits the sweet spot. So
Mm.
I hope everybody reads it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think, something, I've been writing LDS fiction for a while now, and I love Flannery O'Connor, I love John LaRue, the other Bernard Malmood, all these, and I think your story just incredibly captures the mystery of
Mm.
religion, like its messiness, like that
Mhm.
uncertainty, how complicated it is, but how it just feels this void within us that when we kind of distance ourselves from it, there's this gravity that keeps taking us back to it. And I think it's so hard to do that well, and you just do it so masterfully.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So, well, we're getting near the end. Joe, any more questions or?
Um, nope, this is maybe the next question that you had, maybe, right? What are you working on now? Where are you headed next?
That's the last question.
Yeah, I am slowly but surely working on a third novel, you know. 3 kids and a third novel. Still challenging. But that's what I'm working on. It's been
The rule of
since
three.
been drafting it, but I'm pushing it along.
Is it LDS themed? LDS?
Will say I apparently cannot avoid this subject because it is a sort of a story about some lifelong friends. Starts off in World War II, kind of in like an odd couple. And right what you know. So one of them's a rancher from Utah and one of them's a Hudson Valley hotel magnate. So there you go.
Great combo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we'll see. It's coming along.
Would you have time to rip off another short story for us sometime in the next year or two?
I could try, please. Thank you for asking.
Maybe the next letter. Maybe we're going to keep a spot for you for the next decade.
I want
for the next letter. Whenever it turns up. I love it.
Yeah, whenever. So
I think things could get really crazy if the next one was the 60th letter she found.
Well, Charity, thank you for reminding us the power of letters and right, how they can be so intimate and lovely. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Dialogue Out Loud podcast. If you're new to Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought, go to Dialogue Journal for the entire lineup of great podcasts in the Dialogue Podcast Network, where you'll find more interviews, poetry and fiction readings, and even Sunday school lessons, and one recently from our very own Joe Plicka. Dialogue Out Loud is produced and edited by Daniel Foster Smith. So we will see you next time.
Greetings. My name is Rebecca DeSchweinitz, and I'm thrilled to serve as a board member at the Dialogue Foundation and as one of the hosts of Dialogue Gospel Study. In each episode, which we record live the second and fourth Sunday of every month, we welcome esteemed speakers from a variety of backgrounds to share their insights and perspectives on the Come Follow Me lessons. Our aim is to spark meaningful conversations about the scriptures, to connect them to our personal experiences and to our understandings and explorations of the gospel. To stay in the loop with our upcoming lessons and this opportunity to engage with Mormon thought, culture, and belief, be sure to visit dialoguejournal.com and sign up for our newsletter. By doing so, you'll receive updates and timely links to join our live stream lessons. Additionally, you can catch up on our past guests and episodes by subscribing to Dialogue Journal on YouTube, Facebook, or wherever you listen to podcasts.